The stars stretched endlessly outside the observation windows of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Light. Inside, 17 different species moved through the corridors, each representing their home worlds in the Galactic Council's most important peace negotiation in decades. The ship hummed with a quiet energy as it traveled toward Omega Tertius, a neutral station where ancient conflicts would hopefully find resolution. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim stood in the human quarters, adjusting his formal diplomatic uniform, while his daughter Nari played on the floor with her collection of small toy ships. She was 6 years old, with bright eyes and a curious nature that made her want to explore every corner of the vessel. Her presence on this mission was unusual. Most species didn't bring their children to diplomatic events, but Hyunwoo was a widower. His wife had died 2 years ago, and he refused to leave Nari behind for months while he conducted negotiations light years from Earth. "Appa, can we go see the engine room today?" Nari asked, making whooshing sounds as she flew her toy ship through the air. Hyunwoo smiled at his daughter. "Maybe later, sweetheart. Right now, Appa has meetings. But Lieutenant Choi will take you to the observation deck. You can watch the stars." As if summoned by his name, there was a knock at the door. Dong-Eun Choi entered, wearing the crisp uniform of human security forces. He was not a tall man, but something about him made people step aside when he walked past. Scars marked his hands and neck, evidence of battles fought in places most diplomats never wanted to hear about. His eyes moved constantly, checking corners, exits, and potential threats. The other species found him unsettling. "Ambassador," Dong-Eun said with a slight nod. "Ready for the morning briefing?" "In a moment, Nari wants to see the observation deck." Dong-Eun's serious expression softened slightly. "Sure thing, kiddo. We can count the stars while your dad talks about boring political stuff." Nari giggled and jumped up, taking Dong-Eun's offered hand. The three of them left the quarters and entered the main corridor. The ship was busy with activity. A group of crystalline shards glided past, their bodies reflecting light in rainbow patterns. Two massive Kroll warriors lumbered by, their forearms carrying equipment. A floating whisper drifted overhead, its gaseous form contained in a specialized suit. What drew the most attention, however, were the insectoid Valkyrie, their delegation. Moved in precise formation, led by Ambassador Shrill Click Hiss. The Valkyrie were known for their cold logic and efficiency. They viewed emotions as weaknesses and had little patience for species they considered inferior. Shrill Click Hiss's compound eyes tracked Nari as the small human child walked past. Curious, the Valkyrie clicked to his assistant. "The humans bring a juvenile to diplomatic negotiations. Such inefficiency." Nearby, the mammalian Ulari delegate, Thorn of Morning, flicked his ears in what his species considered disgust. "They coddle their young. Weakness. In our culture, juveniles must prove themselves worthy of protection. This one has proven nothing." These conversations happened in the universal translator frequency that most adults monitored, but Hyunwoo and Dong-Eun both heard them. Hyunwoo's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Dong-Eun's hand tensed slightly, but his expression remained neutral. They reached the observation deck, a large room with transparent walls showing the endless expanse of space. Nari pressed her face against the glass, marveling at a distant nebula. Dong-Eun stood behind her, relaxed but alert. "Stay here with Lieutenant Choi," Hyunwoo said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. "I'll be back in 2 hours." After Hyunwoo left for his briefing, Dong-Eun pulled up a chair and sat where he could watch both Nari and the door. The little girl entertained herself by trying to count stars, quickly losing track after 20. She talked constantly, the way children do, asking Dong-Eun questions about space travel, aliens, and whether the food synthesizers could make real chocolate cake. Dong-Eun answered patiently, though his attention never fully left their surroundings. Other delegates came and went from the observation deck. Most ignored the human child. A few watched with curiosity. The shards seemed particularly interested in how Nari interacted with her guardian, fascinated by the obvious bond between them. "Why do you have that scar?" Nari asked, pointing at a mark on Dongyun's neck. "Got it protecting someone," he replied simply. "Like how you protect me and Appa. Exactly like that." "Were you scared?" Dongyun considered the question seriously. "Yeah, I was. But sometimes being scared doesn't matter. What matters is doing the right thing anyway." Nari thought about this for a moment, then nodded as if she understood perfectly. She returned her attention to the stars, making up stories about planets she could see in the distance. An hour passed peacefully. Then Nari decided she wanted to explore. Before Dongyun could stop her, she darted toward a side corridor, laughing. He followed, not worried but cautious. The corridors were safe enough, but he didn't like letting her out of his sight. Nari rounded a corner and collided directly with Shrill Click Hiss. The impact barely moved the large Valkyrie, but Nari bounced backward and landed on her bottom. She wasn't hurt, just surprised. "Watch where you're going, small human," Shrill Click Hiss clicked, his mandibles spreading in what might have been annoyance. Nari looked up at the insect-like alien, eyes wide. "Sorry, Mr. Bug." Several Valkyrie attendants made sharp clicking sounds, which the translator interpreted as offense. Shrill Click Hiss loomed over the child. "I am Ambassador Shrill Click Hiss of the Valkyrie Collective. You will show proper respect, juvenile, or I will file a diplomatic incident report against the human delegation." Dongyun arrived in the next moment, positioning himself smoothly between the Valkyrie ambassador and Nari. He reached down and helped the girl to her feet, then straightened to his full height. He was still shorter than Shrill Click Hiss, but somehow he seemed to fill the corridor. "Ambassador," Dongyun said, his voice perfectly polite, his smile perfectly friendly. "She's 6 years old. Kids bump into things. I'm sure someone of your wisdom and experience understands that accidents happen." The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop several degrees, despite the ship's climate control. Other delegates had gathered, watching the confrontation with interest. None of them had ever seen someone speak to a Valkyrie ambassador with such casual confidence. Shrill Click Hiss studied the human security officer. There was something in this small, scarred man's eyes that the Valkyrie recognized from his own warriors. This human had killed before, would kill again if necessary. The realization was interesting. "See that it does not happen again," Shrill Click Hiss finally said, backing down. He and his attendants moved past, but the ambassador's eyes lingered on Dongyun. After they left, Thorn of Morning approached. "Your species is strange, human. You risk diplomatic incidents for an unproven juvenile. In Ulari culture, she would be expected to defend herself or accept consequences." Dongyun picked up Nari, settling her on his hip. "Good thing she's not Ulari then. She's human. And humans protect their kids. All of them, always." "Inefficient," Thorn of Morning said, but there was something like curiosity in his voice. "Maybe," Dongyun agreed, "but it's who we are." He carried Nari back to the observation deck, listening as she whispered, "Was the bug man going to hurt me?" "No, sweetheart. And even if he tried, he'd have to get past me first." "You'd protect me?" "Every single time." Throughout the ship, the alien delegates talked among themselves. The humans were soft, they said, too emotional, too protective of juveniles who had proven nothing. This would be a weakness to exploit in negotiations. They had no idea how wrong they were. 3 days from Omega Tertius, everything would change. 3 days, and the galaxy would learn what happens when you threaten a human child. 3 days. A man called Badger would show them exactly why humans were the most terrifying species in known space. But for now, Nari counted stars and Dong-Yun watched over her, and Hyun-woo negotiated in rooms full of aliens who thought they understood humanity. They would learn soon enough. The lesson was coming. The attack came without warning on the third day of their journey. Nari was in the recreational area, drawing pictures of the different aliens she had met. Dong-Yun sat nearby, reviewing security protocols on his tablet. Hyun-woo was in another diplomatic session, this one about trade routes. The day felt routine, peaceful even. That was when the first explosion hit. The ship lurched violently to the side. Nari's crayons scattered across the floor as she grabbed a table to keep from falling. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the vessel, and red warning lights flashed in every corridor. "What's happening?" Nari cried, frightened by the noise and chaos. Dong-Yun was already moving. He scooped her up and headed for the door. "Pirates, probably. We need to find your dad." Another explosion rocked the ship. This one was closer, more powerful. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency lighting that cast everything in an eerie red glow. Through the ship's communication system, Captain Facet 7's crystalline voice rang out. "All personnel, this is the captain. We are under attack by hostile forces. Our shields have failed. All delegates must proceed immediately to the escape pod base. This is not a drill. Repeat, proceed to escape pods immediately." The corridors filled instantly with panicked aliens. Species that had seemed dignified and controlled during negotiations now pushed and shoved, desperate to reach safety. The Valkyrie moved in tight formation, trampling smaller species. The Kroll used their size to force paths through the crowd. The crystalline shards simply pushed through anyone in their way, their hard bodies acting like battering rams. Dong-Yun fought against the tide, trying to reach the diplomatic quarters where Hyun-woo would be. He held Nari close, protecting her from the surging mass of bodies. An Alari delegate knocked into them, sending Dong-Yun stumbling. He recovered quickly, but the crowd had gotten thicker, more desperate. "Appa!" Nari screamed, looking for her father. "I know, sweetheart. Hold on tight." A massive Kroll warrior shoved past them, and in the chaos, Dong-Yun lost his grip on Nari. She was swept away by the crowd, her small body carried along by aliens, who didn't notice or didn't care that they had separated a human child from her protector. "Nari!" Dong-Yun roared, trying to push through. But the crowd was too thick, too panicked. He could see her small hand reaching back toward him, hear her crying his name, and then she disappeared around a corner, carried by the stampede. Third explosion. Fourth. The ship's hull was breaching in multiple places. Smoke filled the corridors. The air tasted of burning metal and fear. Dong-Hyun made a decision. He fought his way toward the diplomatic quarters, found Hyun-woo emerging with a group of ambassadors. The man's face was pale with terror. "Where's Nari?" Hyun-woo demanded immediately. Got separated in the crowd. "I'm going after her." "I'm going after her. You need to get to an escape pod." "I'm not leaving without my daughter." Dong-Hyun grabbed Hyun-woo by the uniform. "Listen to me. One of us needs to survive in case something happens. That's you. I will find her. I promise you, Ambassador. I will find your daughter or die trying. Now go." "That's an order." Before Hyun-woo could protest, Dong-Yun shoved him toward the escape pod bay and turned back into the chaos. He moved against the flow of evacuees, pushing past aliens who had abandoned all pretense of civilization. His training kicked in. Clear mind. Focus on the mission. The mission was simple. Find Nari. The ship shuddered again. This time, the explosion was followed by a different sound. Metal on metal. Cutting torches. Boarding tubes attaching to the hull. The pirates were coming inside. Dong-Yun reached the section where he'd lost sight of Nari. The corridor had emptied now, most aliens having made it to the escape pods. He called her name, listening for any response. Nothing but the groan of damaged metal and the hiss of air leaking from breached sections. Then he heard it. A small, frightened whimper coming from a cargo bay. He found her huddled behind a stack of supply crates, her arms wrapped around her knees, tears streaming down her face. When she saw him, she sobbed with relief. "I got lost," she whispered. "Everyone was pushing, and I couldn't find you." Dong-Yun knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. She was scared but unhurt. "You're okay now. I've got you. Climb on my back and hold on tight. We're getting out of here." She wrapped her arms around his neck, and he stood, adjusting her weight. He had memorized the ship's layout on the first day. There was a maintenance route that led to the aft escape pod bay. If they moved fast, they could make it. They made it halfway before running into the pirates. 3 of them rounded the corner ahead, weapons drawn. A Kroll, bigger than any Dong-Yun had seen on the ship. A reptilian scare with scales like armor. And something that was part alien, part machine, its body augmented with combat cybernetics. They saw Dong-Yun and Nari. The Kroll grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Well, what do we have here?" "Human soldier and a little human spawn. Boss said delegates are worth ransom money. Soldiers we kill. Younglings, though." He looked at his companions. "Might be worth something to the right buyer." The scare hissed in agreement. "Human juveniles are rare in this sector. Exotic pet market would pay well." Dong-Yun felt Nari's grip tighten around his neck. He could feel her shaking. Slowly, carefully, he lowered her to the floor and positioned her behind a bulkhead junction where the corridor split. He crouched down to her eye level. "Remember when we talked about being scared?" He whispered. She nodded, tears still on her cheeks. "I'm scared right now, but I'm going to do the right thing anyway. I need you to stay here. Don't come out no matter what you hear. When it's safe, I'll come get you. Can you be brave for me? I don't want you to get hurt." "I know, sweetheart, but this is what I do. Trust me, okay?" She nodded again. Dong-Yun stood and walked back into the main corridor, putting himself between the pirates and the bulkhead where Nari was hidden. The 3 pirates watched him approach. They had weapons. He had nothing. They were fresh and uninjured. He had been thrown around by the ship's violent maneuvers. By all logic, this fight was already over. But logic didn't account for what Dong-Yun was. Back on Earth, before joining the military, Dong-Yun had earned his living in underground fight clubs. Not the glamorous kind shown in movies, but the brutal, desperate kind where men fought for food money and medical bills. He had learned that size didn't matter. Speed didn't matter. What mattered was how much damage you were willing to take to win. And when it came to protecting Nari, he was willing to take all of it. The Kroll stepped forward, confident. "Last chance, human. Hand over the spawn, and we'll kill you quick." Dong-Yun rolled his shoulders, loosening muscles. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "See, here's the thing. I'm having a really bad day. You attacked our ship. You scared a little girl. And now you want me to hand her over to be sold like property?" He smiled. It was the smile of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Try me first." The pirates laughed. They thought he was insane. They had no idea what they were about to face. The Kroll raised his weapon. Dong-Yun moved. What happened next would be recorded by the ship's security cameras. Later, it would be studied at military academies across 17 systems. Analysts would try to break down his techniques, his strategy, his tactical decisions. They would all miss the point. Dong-Yun wasn't using strategy. He wasn't being tactical. He was being human. And humans were absolutely terrifying when protecting their young. The Kroll fired first. Dong-Yun was already moving, throwing himself sideways as the plasma bolt scorched the air where he had been standing. He felt the heat wash over him, smelled his own hair singeing, but he didn't stop moving. In close quarters combat, there was a simple truth that most species never understood. Guns needed distance to be effective. Remove that distance, and suddenly the person with the gun had a metal club that occasionally shot fire. Dongyun closed the gap in 3 running steps. The Kroll tried to track him with the weapon, but Dongyun was already inside his reach. He grabbed 2 of the Kroll's forearms and used the pirate's own strength against him, twisting violently. Something in the Kroll's shoulder joint popped. The pirate howled. The scare came from the side, moving with reptilian speed. His clawed hand raked across Dongyun's back, shredding the uniform and opening 3 deep cuts. Pain exploded through Dongyun's nervous system. He felt blood start to flow. He didn't care. He released the Kroll and spun toward the scare, ducking under another swipe. The reptilian was fast, but predictable. Dongyun had fought things faster than this in the Outer Rim. He waited for the pattern, saw the opening, and drove his fist into the scar's throat with every ounce of strength he had. The scare made a choking sound and staggered backward. Dongyun didn't give him time to recover. He grabbed the pirate's head with both hands and brought his knee up. Once, twice, 3 times. The scar's scales were tough, but the impact still did damage. The cyborg finally moved. It had been calculating, analyzing, looking for the optimal attack pattern. That was its mistake. While it was thinking, Dongyun was already fighting. A blade extended from the cyborg's arm, glowing with heat. It slashed at Dongyun's face. He jerked back, but not fast enough. The blade opened his cheek from ear to jaw. Blood poured down his face, hot and thick. Still didn't care. The cyborg's mechanical parts gave it strength, but made it predictable. Every movement was efficient, calculated. Dongyun was chaos. He grabbed a piece of debris from the floor and threw it at the cyborg's sensors. While the machine was processing the distraction, Dongyun charged. The cyborg shot him in the leg. The plasma bolt punched through Dongyun's thigh, cauterizing as it went. The pain was incredible, like someone had driven a white-hot spike through his muscle. His leg buckled, and he went down on one knee. All 3 pirates closed in. They had him now. 1 damaged human against 3 fighters. The outcome was certain, except Dongyun didn't stay down. He lunged forward, not back. The movement was so unexpected that the pirates hesitated for a critical half-second. Dongyun collided with the cyborg, his weight bearing them both to the ground. The cyborg tried to bring its weapons to bear, but Dongyun was too close. His hands finding the seams where organic met mechanical dot. He dug his fingers into those seams and pulled. Wires tore. Fluid sprayed. The cyborg's movements became erratic as Dongyun literally dismantled it with his bare hands. The machine tried to throw him off, but Dongyun had latched on like a terrier with a rat, and he wasn't letting go. The Kroll, recovered enough to fight, grabbed Dongyun from behind with his 2 good arms. He lifted the human off the cyborg and slammed him against this corridor wall. Once, twice. Dongyun's head bounced off the metal, and stars exploded in his vision. The scar approached, claws extended. Ready to finish this, Dongyun went limp in the Kroll's grip. The pirate thought he had won. He loosened his hold slightly, preparing to throw the unconscious human to the floor. That was when Dongyun bit him. He twisted his head and sank his teeth into the Kroll's arm, finding the vulnerable spot between armor plates. Human jaws could exert hundreds of pounds of pressure. Dongyun used all of it. His teeth met bone, and he tasted alien blood. The Kroll screamed and dropped him. Dongyun rolled, ignoring the agony in his leg and back. He came up with the cyborg's dropped blade, the one that had cut his face. The scare was right there, and Dongyun drove the heated blade through the reptilian's armored chest. The The scare looked down at the blade in shock. Dong-hyun pulled it out and stabbed again. And again. Until the scare stopped moving. The Kroll charged, enraged beyond reason. Dong-hyun tried to dodge, but his injured leg gave out. The Kroll's remaining good arms wrapped around him in a crushing grip. Ribs cracked. Breathing became impossible. Black spots danced in Dong-hyun's vision. The cyborg was pulling itself along the floor, half its systems dead, trying to reach its weapon. The Kroll was crushing the life out of Dong-hyun. In seconds, it would all be over. Dong-hyun thought of Nari hiding behind the bulkhead. He thought of the promise he'd made to Hyunwoo. He thought of all the times he'd told himself that pain was temporary, but failure was permanent. He brought his arms up between the Krolls, breaking the grip with a technique from his Fight Club days. The movement cost him. Another rib broke. But he was free. The Kroll tried to grab him again, and Dong-hyun did something he'd learned from a video about animals on Earth. He went for the eyes. His thumbs found the Kroll's visual organs and pressed. The pirate shrieked and released him, clawing at his own face. Dong-hyun staggered backward, picked up the Kroll's dropped weapon, and fired 3 times. The Kroll stopped moving. The cyborg had reached its weapon. It aimed at Dong-hyun with shaking mechanical hands. Dong-hyun threw himself flat as plasma fire scorched over his head. He rolled toward the cyborg, came up inside its range, and brought his boot down on its head. Again and again, until it stopped moving. Then silence. Dong-hyun stood in the corridor, swaying. He was shot twice, stabbed once, had broken ribs, a wounded leg, cuts all over his body. Blood covered him, his own and the pirates'. His right hand was broken from striking armored bodies. His vision was blurry. He was still standing. He limped to the bulkhead where Nari was hiding. She looked out, saw him covered in blood, and started crying. "It's okay," he said, his voice rough. "Most of it's not mine. We need to keep moving. You're hurt bad. I've been hurt worse. Come on." He picked up a pirate rifle, checked its charge, and held out his good hand. Nari took it, her small fingers wrapping around his. They started moving through the ship. They passed other signs of the pirate attack. Bodies of crew members who had fought back. Smashed equipment. Scorched walls. The ship was dying around them, life support failing section by section. They encountered 2 more pirates in a junction. Dong-hyun killed them both before they could react. Nari kept her eyes closed during the fighting, but she held his hand tight. They found a functioning terminal. Dong-hyun accessed the ship's systems, looking for the escape pod bays. Most were already gone, launched into space. But there was one section still showing delegates aboard. The observation deck. His heart sank. That's where the pirates would have gathered any survivors for ransom. That's where they'd be holding anyone who hadn't escaped. That's where Hyunwoo might be. "We have to go there," Nari whispered. Reading his expression, "It's dangerous. Appa might be there." Dong-hyun looked down at this small human child who had just watched him kill 5 pirates to protect her. She should have been traumatized, broken. Instead, she was worried about her father. That was humanity. That was the thing the aliens couldn't understand. "Okay," he said, "but you have to promise me something. When we get there, you run to your dad and you stay behind him. No matter what happens to me, you stay with him. Deal?" "Deal." They moved through the damaged ship, Dong-hyun checking every corner, every shadow. He was bleeding badly now, leaving a trail behind him. The rifle in his hands felt heavy. His leg could barely support his weight. He kept moving anyway, because somewhere ahead was a little girl's father. Somewhere ahead were people who needed help. And Dong-hyun had made a promise. On Earth, there was an animal called a honey badger. It was small, tough, and absolutely fearless. When attacked, it didn't run. When hurt, it didn't quit. It just kept fighting until either it won or it died. Dong-Yun had earned his nickname, Honestly. They reached the observation deck. Through the door, he could hear voices. Pirates, hostages, the rattle of weapons. He looked at Nari one more time. "Ready?" She nodded, trying to be brave. Dong-Yun opened the door. The observation deck had become a prison. 15 delegates knelt on the floor, hands behind their heads, surrounded by 8 heavily armed pirates. At the center stood Grathmag, the leader of the Korath Ravagers. He was massive, even for a Kroll, his 4 arms all functioning, his body covered in armor made from the hulls of ships he'd destroyed. A collection of weapons hung from his belt, trophies from species who had tried to stop him. Ambassador Hyunwoo was among the hostages, his face a mask of controlled terror. Beside him knelt Shrill Click Hiss, Thorn of Morning, Captain Facet 7, and representatives from a dozen other species. They had all surrendered without a fight, calculating that cooperation meant survival. That was when the door opened. Dong-Yun stepped through, and every weapon in the room turned toward him. He was a nightmare made real. Blood soaked his uniform from dozens of wounds. His face was cut open, already swelling. He limped heavily, his leg barely supporting his weight. One arm hung at an odd angle, clearly broken. He looked like he should have been dead. Behind him, small and frightened, was Nari. Grathmag laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together. One human soldier, already bleeding out. Probably can't even aim that rifle anymore. And you came here? Stupid human. So very stupid. Appa. Nari screamed when she saw her father. Hyenwoo's control broke. Tears ran down his face, but he couldn't move. Couldn't reach for her with weapons pointed at his head. Dong-Yun gently pushed Nari forward. His voice was surprisingly calm. "Run to your dad, kiddo. Stay behind him like we talked about. But you're hurt, now, Nari." She hesitated one more second, then ran across the observation deck. The pirates watched her go, amused. What was one small human child? She wasn't a threat. Their weapons stayed pointed at Dong-Yun. Nari reached her father and threw herself into his arms. Hyunwoo held her tight, his body shaking with relief and terror. She was alive. His daughter was alive. Grathmag studied Dong-Yun with new interest. "You fought through my crew to bring the small one here. You could have escaped. Taken her to an escape pod and run. Why come to this place?" Dong-Yun checked the rifle's charge indicator. Nearly empty. Maybe 3 shots left. He let the weapon clatter to the floor. Because these people needed help. Because that's what humans do. We don't leave people behind. Several of the kneeling delegates made sounds of confusion. The Valkyrie ambassador clicked his mandibles rapidly. Illogical. The juvenile is safe. Your mission is complete. Sacrificing yourself achieves nothing. Dong-Yun looked at the aliens who had surrendered without fighting, who would have let the pirates take Nari without protest, who found human protectiveness completely incomprehensible. His gaze settled on Hyunwoo, holding his daughter. "You know what a honey badger is?" Dong-Yun asked the room. Nobody answered. "It's an animal from Earth, toughest creature on the planet. Gets attacked by lions, bitten by venomous snakes, stung by thousands of bees. Doesn't matter. You know why?" He took one step forward. Every pirate tensed. Because a honey badger doesn't care about the odds. Doesn't care about pain. Doesn't calculate survival chances. It just fights. And it makes you regret ever starting the fight. Another step. Blood dripped from his wounds, leaving spots on the floor. "I didn't come here expecting to win. I'm not stupid. I know I'm barely standing. I know you'll probably kill me. But here's what you need to understand." His voice hardened. "If you want any of these people, if you want that little girl, you have to go through me first. And I promise you, I will make you pay for every single step." Mag's amusement faded. He saw something in this broken human's eyes that reminded him of the most dangerous prey animals on his own world. The ones that fought back even when cornered. The ones that left scars. "Kill him," Mag ordered. 5 pirates opened fire. Dong Yun moved. Not away from the weapon's fire, but toward it. The first bolt caught him in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. The second grazed his ribs. The third missed as he ducked low and charged forward. What happened next would be analyzed by military strategists for years. Dong Yun wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make them afraid. To show them that even a single human, wounded and dying, was more dangerous than they could imagine. He reached the first pirate and drove his forehead into the alien's face. Bone crunched. The pirate dropped. Dong Yun took his weapon and fired point blank at the next closest enemy. The plasma bolt punched through armor. A pirate shot him in the side. Dong Yun stumbled but caught himself on a nearby support pillar. He swung around it, using the momentum to kick another pirate in the head. His broken hand was useless, so he fought one-handed, using his legs, his elbows, his head as weapons. More plasma fire found him. His chest. His leg again. His back. Each hit should have dropped him. Each wound should have been fatal. He kept fighting in the chaos. 3 delegates found their courage. Thorn of Morning, despite his earlier words about weak humans, saw an opportunity. He lunged at his guard, his Ulari claws finding vulnerable spots. Captain Facet 7, her crystalline body nearly indestructible, rose and tackled another pirate. A third delegate, a quiet being from a species no one had paid attention to, moved with surprising speed to help. The observation deck became a battlefield. Dong Yun was the center of it, drawing fire, creating openings, refusing to die. He took 17 direct hits before he finally went down, collapsing against the transparent wall that looked out into space. But by then, it was too late for the pirates. Facet 7 had triggered the emergency security protocols, something she'd been too afraid to use while guns were pointed at her head. Bulkheads slammed down throughout the ship, trapping pirates in sections where they were outnumbered. The ship's security team, delayed by the initial attack, finally reached the observation deck. They poured through the doors with weapons ready. Mag saw his defeat coming. He raised his weapon, pointed it at Nari, making a last desperate bid for control. Dong Yun saw. Even lying broken on the floor, even with his vision fading, he saw. He pulled himself up one last time and threw himself forward. The blast meant for Nari hit him instead, burning through his chest. He fell and didn't get up again. Security forces overwhelmed the remaining pirates. Mag was taken down by a dozen shots. The other pirates either surrendered or died. When the fighting stopped, Hyunwoo was still holding Nari, who was screaming for Dong Yun. Medical teams rushed in. They found the security officer barely alive, more machine than man now with all the medical equipment keeping him breathing. "Save him," Hyunwoo demanded. "I don't care what it costs. Save him." The medics looked at each other. In most species medicine, this many injuries meant death. But they'd heard stories about human resilience, about how humans survive things that should kill them. "We'll try," the lead medic said. But no promises. As they loaded Dong Yun onto the medical stretcher, his eyes opened briefly. He saw Nari safe in her father's arms. Saw the delegates looking at him with new understanding. "Told you," he whispered. "Honey badger. Doesn't care." Then he passed out, his body finally giving in to the damage. The delegates stood in the ruined observation deck, surrounded by fallen pirates, and tried to process what they had witnessed. Shrill Click Hiss approached Hyunwoo, his mandibles moving in what might have been respect. "Your soldier. He is exceptional." Hyunwoo looked at the Valkyrie ambassador. His daughter was crying against his chest, and his best friend was being rushed to medical with injuries that should have killed him 3 times over. No, Hyunwoo said quietly. He's typical. You just saw a human protecting someone they care about. If you think that was terrifying, you have no idea what my species is capable of when we're actually trying. The words hung in the air as medical teams worked to stabilize the dying human who had fought 8 pirates and won. The galaxy was about to learn a new lesson. Never threaten what a human loves. 3 weeks passed before Dong-yoon opened his eyes again. The medical bay of Omega 30th Station was quiet, except for the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Human doctors had taken over his care after the first week. Working with alien medical technology, they barely understood to save a life that should have been lost a dozen times over. Dong-yoon's first sensation was pain. It wrapped around him like a blanket, constant and familiar. His second sensation was weight on his chest. Small weight. Warm weight. He opened his eyes slowly. Nari was curled up on his medical bed, her head resting on his chest, fast asleep. Someone had given her a blanket. Her hand clutched a small toy ship, one of the ones she'd been playing with before the attack. Hyunwoo sat in a chair beside the bed, reading something on a tablet. He looked up when he heard Dong-yoon's breathing change. "You're awake," Hyunwoo said softly, not wanting to wake his daughter. "The doctors said you'd wake up today." They were right. Dong-yoon tried to speak. His throat was dry, painful. Hyunwoo held a cup of water to his lips, helping him drink. "Nari?" Dong-yoon finally managed. "She's fine. Not a scratch on her. Thanks to you." Hyunwoo's voice was thick with emotion. "She's barely left your side. The doctors had to make her eat and sleep. She keeps drawing you pictures. Look." He gestured to the walls. They were covered in children's drawings. Dong-yoon holding her hand. Dong-yoon standing between her and scary monsters. Dong-yoon with a medal. In every picture, he was smiling. "You saved her life," Hyunwoo continued. "You saved all of us. Do you remember?" "Parts of it," Dong-yoon said. His memory was foggy, but the important parts were clear. The fight. The pirates. Throwing himself in front of that final shot meant for Nari. You took 17 direct plasma hits. Broke 9 bones. Lost half your blood. The doctor said you should have died 5 times over during the fight alone. They asked me what kind of combat drugs humans use. I told them you weren't on any drugs. You just decided you weren't done yet." Dong-yoon managed a weak smile. "Stubborn. Always been stubborn. You're getting a medal. 3, actually. The Galactic Council wants to give you their highest honor. Something about exceptional valor in defense of multiple species. Don't want medals. Just wanted to keep her safe." On his chest, Nari stirred and woke up. She saw Dong-yoon's open eyes and sat up quickly. "You're awake." "Appa, he's awake." "I see, sweetheart." Gentle, remember. He's still healing. But Nari was already hugging him as carefully as a 6-year-old could manage. "I was so scared. You were sleeping for so long, and the doctor said you might not wake up, and I kept talking to you, but you didn't answer. And, hey," Dong-yoon interrupted gently. "I'm okay. Takes more than a few pirates to keep me down. You got really hurt protecting me. That's my job. And I'd do it again." Over the next few days, visitors came. Delegates who had been in the observation deck, wanting to thank the human who had saved them. They brought gifts from their worlds, tokens of respect that meant nothing to Dong-yoon but seemed important to them. Shrill click hiss came with his attendance. The Valkyrie ambassador stood at the foot of the medical bed, his compound eyes studying Dong-yoon for a long moment. "I told Ambassador Kim that your behavior was illogical," Shrill click hiss said. "I was wrong. It was not illogical. It was simply a logic I did not understand. You humans calculate differently than my species. We don't really calculate at all when it comes to kids, Dongyun replied. We just protect them. All of them. It's not a choice. It's who we are. Yes, we are learning this now. The other delegates have spread the story of what happened. The recording from the ship's security cameras has been shared across the galactic network. Many species are reconsidering their understanding of humanity. Good. Maybe they'll think twice before threatening human children. Indeed. Shrill click hiss clicked his mandibles in what might have been respect. The Valkyrie Collective wishes to establish better relations with Earth. We have much to learn from each other. After the Valkyrie left, dawn of morning came. The Ulari delegate looked uncomfortable. I said your species was weak, he began without preamble. I said you coddled your young. I was wrong. What you did was not weakness. It was the most impressive display of strength I have witnessed. In my culture, we now understand that humans measure strength differently. You protect what you love with absolute dedication. There is honor in this. More visitors came. The crystalline captain Facet 7, who credited Dongyun with giving her the courage to fight back. Other delegates who had cowered in fear and now felt ashamed of their cowardice. They all left understanding that humans were not weak. They were terrifying, but the most important change happened across the galaxy itself. The story spread like fire through the galactic network. A single human security officer, wounded and outnumbered, had fought 8 pirates to protect a child and a group of delegates who weren't even his own species. The security footage was analyzed, shared, discussed. Military strategists tried to understand his tactics. Psychologists tried to understand his motivation. They missed a simple truth. He was a human protecting a kid. That was all the motivation needed. The Karath Ravagers learned this lesson the hard way. After the attack on Harmony's Light, human military forces hunted them across 12 systems with a dedication that terrified other species. The pirates had attacked a human child. Humanity responded with overwhelming force. Within 6 months, the Karath Ravagers ceased to exist as an organization. The survivors fled to the deepest parts of unknown space, spreading warnings to other pirate groups. Do not target humans. Do not threaten their young. The price is too high. 8 weeks after waking up, Dong-hyun was released from medical care. He still limped. Several of his injuries would never fully heal. But he could walk, could function, could do his job. The peace negotiations at Omega Tertius concluded successfully, perhaps because all the delegates now understood each other better. Humanity was granted full membership in the Galactic Council, not because of their technology or their trade goods, but because the other species had finally understood what humans truly were: protectors, defenders, warriors, who fought not for conquest but for those they loved. The medal ceremony was held in the station's Grand Hall. Representatives from 50 species attended. Dong-hyun stood at attention in his dress uniform, while officials read his citations. 3 medals were pinned to his chest. The applause was thunderous. Nari sat in the front row with her father, clapping harder than anyone. When the ceremony ended, she ran to Dong-hyun and hugged his leg. "You look so fancy," she said. "Thanks, kiddo. You look pretty fancy yourself." She was wearing a new dress, something Hyunwoo had bought for the occasion. "Are you going to keep protecting me and Appa every single day?" "Good, because Appa said we're staying here for a long time. He's going to be the Earth representative." Dong-hyun looked at Hyunwoo, who nodded. Someone needs to stay and help the other species understand humanity better. Figured unqualified. "You're still my security detail, if you're willing." "Wouldn't have it any other way, sir." Life on Omega Tertius became routine after that. Dong-hyun continued his work, though now other species treated him with a mixture of respect and wariness. Young human soldiers began arriving at the station, assigned to security details for diplomats. They all wanted to meet the honey badger, the man who had become a legend. One day, 6 months after the attack, Dong-hyun was teaching Nari self-defense moves in the station's gym. She was getting better, learning to fall properly, to strike effectively for her size. Yunwoo watched from the sidelines, smiling. A young human soldier approached cautiously. "Lieutenant Choi? I'm Private Minho Park. Just arrived from Earth. I watched the footage from the Harmony's light. What you did was incredible." Dong-hyun helped Nari to her feet and looked at the private. "What I did was necessary. Any soldier would have done the same. But you fought 8 pirates while wounded. You took hits that should have killed you. How did you keep going?" Dong-hyun glanced at Nari, who was practicing her punches against a training pad. "You know what they say about honey badgers back on Earth, sir? Toughest animals on the planet. They fight lions, survive snake bites that would kill other animals. Know why? Because when something threatens what they care about, honey badgers just don't care about the danger. They fight anyway." He put his hand on the private's shoulder. "That's what being human means. When someone needs protection, we don't calculate odds. We don't worry about getting hurt. We just step up. That's the lesson the galaxy needed to learn." The private nodded, understanding that evening. As Dong-hyun walked Nari back to their quarters, she asked him a question. "Are all humans like you?" "What do you mean?" "Brave and willing to fight for people." Dong-hyun thought about that. "Yeah, most of us are. When it matters. When someone we care about is in danger. That's just how we're made. I'm glad I'm human then." "Me too, kiddo." "Me too." Above them, through the station's transparent dome, the stars shone endlessly. Out there, across the galaxy, the story of the honey badger and the human child continued to spread. Pirates learned to avoid human ships. Predatory species thought twice before threatening smaller beings in the presence of humans. A predatory species thought twice before threatening smaller beings in the presence of humans. A predatory species thought twice before threatening smaller beings. New understanding had taken root in galactic society. Humans were not the strongest species.